the snowy mountains of Mantica, it has long been rumoured that the remains of the Dwarven King, King Granolius IV, lies somewhere in this region, next to these ancient Dwarven ruins. So, with that in mind, dwarves have been dispatched to retrieve his remains and bring them to safety because they've heard whisperings on the old grapevine that the undead are in town looking to revive King Granolius IV and turn him into an evil undead revenant. So both sides will be trying to claim this area of the battlefield right here. That of course means that it's the dominate scenario. Both sides want to have units wholly within 12 inches of the centre point of the table, and the victory will be determined by unit strength. So a horde is worth 3, a regiment is worth 2, troops and monsters or non-individual heroes are worth 1 only. So let's go through the forces, shall we? Starting with the noble dwarves. What do we have over here?
So we have a horde of ironclad with throwing mastiffs. Next to them in the piece of difficult terrain there, we have an organ gun with a battle driller on either side. Moving down, we have a berserker Brock Rider regiment with the potion of the caterpillar, and hiding just next to them is the Brock Lord, the berserker lord on a Brock, with the quicksilver rapier. Claiming the hill in the middle, we have 2 organ guns, a warsmith just hiding behind there at the back to inspire them and to give them a bit of elite, some rerolls. In the middle here we have another ironclad horde. This unit has the Sparkstone, the new item from the Clash of Kings book. Behind there, an army standard bearer with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. And then just hiding behind this wall on the side of the horde is a troop of sharpshooters with a piercing arrow, or the piercing bullet, as we might like to call it. We have a ranger captain who's just vanguarded up behind that piece of terrain, so he's just looking all the undead across the battlefield, see if he can get some early shots off with his crossbow. He's got the wings of Honeymaze as well. And then on the right flank we have another horde of ironclad, again with throwing mastiffs, and next to them a steel behemoth, mighty monster of the dwarven race.
For the undead, starting on this flank, we have a regiment of revenant cavalry with the Brew of Strength. Alongside them is a revenant king on a worm, not flying, but he does have the Blade of Slashing. Sliding along we have a regiment of skeleton warriors, backed up by a troop of wraiths. Right there in the centre we have a zombie legion, of course, backed up by a necromancer with Bane Chant and the Inspiring Talisman. No upgrades on the zombies. As we move down we have a troop of ghouls, and behind them a horde of werewolves with the Helm of the Ram for some thunderous charge action. Over on this flank we have another Revenant King on Worm. This one is flying, and this one has the Diadem of Dragonkind, so a bit of sneaky shooting attack from him there. Then we have another troop of Wraiths. We have a Revenant King on a horse with the Mace of Crushing. And finally we have another regiment of Revenant Cavalry with the Potion of the Caterpillar. So a bit of a wide shot here. You can see there's quite a bit of terrain, and this large piece of impassable terrain here, height 4. So that's going to prove to be quite interesting when it comes to lanes of firing, and also it's partially in the dominate zone as well, which is going to make it more difficult to get units in there. So we'll see how that factors into the game. Okay, it's time for the roll-off for the choice of first turn. Here we go. It's a 4 and a 5 for the dwarves, so they're going to get the choice. The dwarves elected to let the undead show their bony hand first. Over here, the Revenant Cavalry have stayed behind this hill because they're a bit terrified of that organ gun over there. And here, this Revenant King hasn't moved up very far either, so he's only going to be in range of a single organ gun next turn. So a little bit conservative on this side. More of a push in the middle though. The skeletons and the zombies were both surged forward by the Revenant King and the Necromancer, who's standing back here. And here, the ghouls and the werewolves have pushed forward at full speed ahead. And the Revenant King has moved from behind here over to behind the werewolves to lend support on this side. And over on the left flank, the Revenant Cavalry, the Revenant King on the horse, and the Wraiths are all pretty much level with each other, staring down this side of the dwarven lines. So no shooting attacks other than the surge, so no damage dished out, and we're going to go straight into dwarf turn 1. Dwarf turn 1, and the majority of the lines have stayed back in a bit of a defensive posture, a bit of repositioning and rejigging of various units. However, the Brock Riders couldn't contain themselves. They've got thirst for undead flesh, and they charged headlong into the skeletons that they were just within charge range of, and they've eaten them in one go, as you can see. So they may have left themselves open, but I'm sure they've got something up their sleeve. And over here, all the shooting at the werewolves from the sharpshooters and all 3 organ guns. So the werewolves were actually in cover from all of that shooting, but they still somehow managed to take 8 damage and become wavered. So they're kind of stuck there now. So a little bit of a change is going to be required in the undead battle plan here, I think, because the Brocks weren't expected to be there, and a bit of wavering going on here. So we'll see what the undead do to counter that. You can see at the end of turn 1, the undead have 40 minutes left, and the dwarves have 34 minutes left. Part way into undead turn 2, so we've paused the clock for a second so I can tell you all about this juicy action. So the zombies were just able to get a flank charge without the aid of Surge into the Brock Riders, but it didn't actually help anyway because the Necromancer failed to cast Bane Chant on them regardless, which is what I was hoping for. And then the Wraiths moved up towards the flank, and then this happy chappy surged them into the flank as well, so hopefully the Brock Riders are going to go bye-bye. Over here, the ghouls and the organ gun were positioned exactly on the line, so they were exactly 24 inches apart at the start of the game, meaning that they were able to get a charge off in 2 turns. So unfortunate there for Mr. Organ Gun. Over here, the Wraiths charged into the Ranger Captain, and the Revenant King on horse has just parked himself in front of this unit of Ironclad to block them to prevent any attack on the flank of the Wraiths, hopefully. And the Knights have just moved up into position to just stare threateningly into this whole region here. So we're going to move into the combat phase now. The only shooting was the Surge that was successful over here, and the failed Bane Chant from the Necromancer. Results of the Undead combat phase. So the zombies didn't do that much damage considering the huge amount of attacks, but the Wraiths piled on quite a lot onto the Brocks as well, so that was enough to get them into double Onesville, and the Brocks are gone. They paid the price for taking out those skeletons. Up here, the ghouls did a few damage to the organ gun, 3 I think, and they managed to waver it, which is okay. It wouldn't have been able to shoot regardless. And over here, the Wraiths put 3 damage onto the Ranger Captain, but they couldn't waver him. So he's not going to be able to shoot, but he will be able to countercharge them. So, going into the Dwarf turn 2, and as far as the scenario goes, at this early stage, I think the Undead have the advantage, because I think probably just the Werewolves and this Revenant King are sitting in the centre, but I'm not sure the Werewolves are going to live much longer. Part way through Dwarf turn 2, and you'll notice the werewolves aren't there anymore. That's because they were shot at by the organ gun. They still had cover from that, but the sharpshooters chipped in as well with a successful Bane Chant on them, which is more difficult to get off now, but it worked. First time I've actually seen it work on a ranged unit. So the werewolves were toast. Then over here, the Steel Behemoth put 2 damage onto these Revenant Cavalry, but obviously they can't be wavered. And over here, the other Revenant Cavalry took 2 damage as well from the Throwing Mastiffs. And the Revenant King on Worm took 6 damage from the organ gun there. So there were charges as well. The Berserker Lord on Brock charged into the Wraiths. This huge horde of Ironclad charged into the flank of the ghouls. And over here there's been a double charge on the Revenant King from the Ranger Captain and the Ironclad horde. So, quite a few combats to get to. We'll let you know the results of that shortly, but I think most of them are not going to end well for the Undead. End of the Dwarf combat phase. So, here, the Berserker Lord put 1 damage onto the Wraiths, so not a huge amount, but it is going to stop them flying, which could be very important when that big gun line is back there, within flying distance. The ghouls are dead, obviously, from that huge flank charge, but the Ironclad unit couldn't really pivot themselves because the organ gun was right there, so they're kind of stuck and probably going to get flank charged by this Revenant King, potentially, or maybe zombies. We'll see what the Undead can shenanigan their way to there. And over on this flank, 5 damage was applied to the Revenant King on horse. Not very good rolling from the Ironclad, it has to be said, although they were hindered on their charge in the first place. So he's alright, and now there are some potential flanks open there as well. So, going into Undead turn 3, and we'll see if the juice can start seeping out. As far as the clock goes, at the end of turn 2, the Undead have 29 minutes left, and the Dwarves have about 21.5 minutes left. Just before the Undead combat phase, so we're just going to give you the state of play here. The Revenant King has made a hindered charge into the front of these Ironclad, along with the Revenant Cavalry there as well. In the centre, the Wraiths countercharged the Berserker Lord, and the zombies were surged into him, because there's not much they can reach at the moment. So the organ guns are pretty much unmolested this turn, because the Revenant King on Worm decided instead of going for an organ gun, he was going to go after this big scoring unit in the flank. I realised I couldn't surge the zombies into the flank, so they didn't bother trying to attack that unit at all, because it would have been in the front. So it's just him on his own. Down here, the Wraiths resisted the temptation of a flank charge on the Ironclad because they want to get those sharpshooters next time. They couldn't be surged in, though, because the Revenant King was disordered. So he's charged back into the Ironclad, and the Revenant Cavalry have charged into the Ranger Captain, hoping to kill him and then overrun into the Ironclad. A few pivotal combats coming up now, because if they don't get some killing done, there's going to be some exposed flanks to that big steel behemoth. So we shall see how it goes. Combat all over the table. So a mixed combat bag for the undead this round, and these Ironclad have been put on 15 damage from the combined attacks at the front, but couldn't quite waver or rout them. In the middle, though, the Brock Berserker Lord is dead, after the Wraiths and the Zombies did him in. Over here, the Revenant King in the flank did a fair bit of damage. He got 10 onto this unit, but not enough, because they're a big juicy horde with plenty of nerve. And over here, well, the Revenant Cavalry did some damage to this guy. I think he's actually on 8 damage. So with the 8 damage, it wouldn't require much of a nerve roll to take him down, but it was the dreaded double 1. So they're now stuck there, exposing their flank to the steel behemoth. Then the Revenant King on horse did 0 damage to the horde as well. So not very good on this flank, but slightly better over here. Going into Dwarf turn 3 now. Partway into the Dwarf turn 3, just before combat, so the 2 battle drillers have charged into the Revenant King here, and the Ironclad Horde have countercharged the Revenant Cavalry. In the middle, you'll see that the Zombie Legion have taken 10 damage. That's as a result of 3 organ guns shooting at them, and also the Engineer as well. So not quite enough. So that gamble might backfire if the zombies are able to charge someone in a minute. Over here, the Ironclad Horde countercharged this Revenant King, as you'd expect, and the sharpshooters turn to face the Wraiths. So if they are going to get charged, they're going to take it face first. And over here, the Ranger Captain has just moved slightly out of the way, so that should this Ironclad Horde overrun the Revenant King on horse, they will then carry on into the cavalry who have been flank charged by the steel behemoth. So they could be potentially toast in a minute, unless there's some bad rolling over there. So going into the combat phase now, could be quite an important one. With some good rolls, the Dwarves could really swing this in their favour now. Another mixed bag this time for the Dwarves in combat. So, very little damage was dished out onto the Revenant Cavalry, so they're 100% fine. The Revenant King took a bit from the battle drills, but he's alright as well. Over here, this Revenant King took 5 damage, but that's not enough to worry him yet. And down at this end, this is where the major damage was dished out. So first of all, the Revenant King on the horse took some more damage, and he became wavered. And then, the Revenant Knights were then cut down, drilled to death by the steel behemoth. So they are dead, and this flank is looking very dwarf-friendly at the moment. At the end of turn 3, the Undead have 19 minutes left, and the Dwarves have 11 minutes left. So getting a bit tight on time there. Going into Undead turn 4 now. So we've had the Undead movement and shooting. You can see here that the Knights have decided they're going to be enough to finish off this horde. They don't need the assistance of Revenant King. So he's gone into one of the battle drillers, hoping to overrun into the other one. The Wraiths have charged into this organ gun. The zombies here have charged into the central organ gun. And the Wraiths that were over there opposite the sharpshooters have flown towards this organ gun that was on the hill so they could see it, and they've charged that. Down here, the Revenant King here has charged into this horde again. And over on this flank, nothing at all, because the Revenant King on horse is still wavered. So no combat over there, but plenty across the rest of the table. So if this goes well for the Undead, it's not going to be looking too good for the Dwarves, because they've got a lot of potential scoring points over in this corner, away from the dominate zone. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, the results of the Undead combat phase, and it did go quite well actually. So over here, the Knights managed to finish off the Ironclad Horde. Over here, the Revenant King on the Worm took out the first battle driller, overran into the second, but couldn't quite take that out, so that's just wavered. Here, the Wraiths could only put 4 damage onto this organ gun, and were unable to waver or rout it, but it's not going to be able to shoot regardless. Here, the zombies took out an organ gun, just about. They only did 8 damage, considering they had a huge number of attacks. These Wraiths killed the organ gun they fought as well. I think that one was already wounded. And here, The Revenant King on Worm did a bit more damage to this horde, but they are going to survive that round, but it's not looking good for them because they're surrounded by undead here. And over here, of course, nothing happened because there was no combat. So going into Dwarf turn 4 now, and they really need to kill something, I would say, otherwise it's not looking too friendly for them at all. Dwarf turn 4, you join us just before the combat phase. So the Battle Driller passed his Headstrong, so he's countercharged into the Revenant King. Over here, the Ironclad Horde have countercharged this Revenant King, and they're also Bane chanted now, as a result of the Standard Bearer, so that's handy. 1 damage was applied to the Zombie Legion with the pistol shot of the Engineer down there, and the Ranger Captain is charged into the Wraiths. Also, the Sharpshooters have turned round a bit just to face the action, because there's nothing really for them to affect down there, because I'd expect this Revenant King to be dead soon. He's been charged by the Ironclad Horde again, and the Behemoth is very, very slowly making its way over there. That difficult terrain is really slowing it down, so it's going to struggle to have an impact on the rest of the game, I think, but you never know. Going into the combat phase. So, the Dwarf combat phase. A bit of a mixed bag, but overall mostly negative, I would say. So, first of all, this Revenant King did become wavered as a result of the Battle Driller, so that might hold up the cavalry a little bit from going where they want to go. And over here, just a couple more points of damage from the Horde onto this Revenant King, very disappointing rolling from them. And speaking of disappointing, this Horde did 0 damage to the Revenant King on horse, so he's going to be able to just do whatever he wants next turn, willy-nilly. He can be running around surging people or charging wherever he wants. So that was a terrible roll there. We're about to head into turn 5, and currently the units in the centre are probably just the Revenant King on Worm and this Ironclad Horde that's probably about to get smushed. As far as the clock goes, the Undead have 10 minutes 40, the Dwarves have 8 minutes 3 seconds, so they've sped up a little bit, and they'll be hoping that that's enough to actually not time out in this game. We're about to start the Undead turn 5 combat phase, but before that, these Revenant Knights that were held up by their king being wavered there have just pivoted through him and gone over this way, hoping to reach the centre by the end of the game. And then the zombies flank charged this horde of Ironclad, and they were then Bane chanted by Mr. Necropants. That horde has also been charged in the front by the Revenant King as well. The Wraiths resisted the urge to rear charge that unit because they don't think they'll be needed, so they actually, because they could still fly, they charged these Sharpshooters, but they're going to be hindered because they land on the wall. But then the Revenant King, who miraculously survived a horde in the face, has then charged over here to attack them as well. So hopefully they're going to be toasted. And I've just kind of abandoned this corner of the table, so those dwarf units are currently unmolested. And into the combat phase we go. It could be a painful one for the dwarves this, they could lose that big horde. Undead turn 5 combat phase. So, the Wraiths finished off the organ gun. The zombies in the flank and the Revenant King on Worm in the front was too much for that Ironclad horde, so they're toasted. The zombies have turned to face the dominate zone. Over here they're a bit less successful. The Wraiths and the Revenant King on horse only put 1 damage between them onto the Sharpshooters. So it's enough to stop them shooting, which is nice, but could have done with a little bit more. It's looking quite healthy, the centre of the table, for the Undead at the moment. Going into the Dwarf turn 5 now, and they really need to pull something out big time here. So, part way into Dwarf turn 5, and they've got a clear strategy. So first of all, this little Battle Driller is hoping to try and finish off the Revenant King there. Down here, a couple more points damage were plinked onto the zombies from various shooting attacks. I think it was the Ranger Captain that actually did it. He's parked himself an inch away from them, but he slid down the hill a bit. So, we've worked out exactly where the dominate zone is, and if they don't kill him by charging him, then they could potentially get stuck outside the dominate zone, which would leave only this Revenant King in there, currently as it stands. Over here, the Steel Behemoth didn't do anything to the Wraiths with its shooting attack, as it's finally trundled out of that difficult terrain, and the Sharpshooters have countercharged this Revenant King on horse, thinking they might have a chance of killing him, because he's already significantly damaged. And they've not been Bane chanted actually, that was a fail. So, let's see what the Dwarves can do in combat. There's only the 1 combat, I think. Oh, 2 actually. There's the Sharpshooters over there, and the Battle Driller, so we'll see how that plays out. So, the Battle Driller did 0 damage to the Revenant King on Worm, unfortunately for him. But, over here, slightly better, because the Sharpshooters actually put some damage onto the Revenant King on horse, and then they were able to finish him off. Even though he inspires himself, he is gone. So this flank, still looking good for the Dwarves, but it's quite far away from the zone that they want to be in at this stage. So as far as the clock goes, heading into turn 6, the Undead have 5 minutes 42, and the Dwarves have 4 minutes 32. So pretty close on time. So, the entirety of Undead turn 6, it was a very quick one. So, over here, the Revenant King on Worm killed the Battle Driller, overran 1 inch, so he's not going to be able to affect the rest of the game probably, apart from with Surging, potentially, if we get a turn 7. Here, the Revenant Cavalry moved up to the edge of the Dominate Zone, and then the Necromancer tried to surge them into it, but he didn't quite roll high enough, so they're just lingering right on the edge at the moment. Here, the Revenant King on Worm in the centre, the flying one, he's repositioned himself a bit, so he's fairly safe for now, and if there's a turn 7 he'll be able to pounce, hopefully. He's the only unit that's actually in there now, because the zombies put more damage onto the range captain, but they double wand him on the second dice roll. So he is there and he's absolutely fine, so he's going to be able to affect the game still. The same can't be said for the sharpshooters though, because they took more damage in combat, which means that while alive they're not going to be able to shoot. Going into potentially the final dwarf turn, and there's probably no way they can actually win if it ends on turn 6, but they can definitely position themselves so they've got a fighting chance if it goes to turn 7. So the dwarf turn 6, potentially the last turn of the game, and they went all out trying to kill the Revenant King on Worm, since he's currently the only unit scoring any points at all. So Bane Chant failed to be cast on the Ranger Captain, and then he unloaded his salvo of shots towards it, but he couldn't actually do any damage with them. Also, the Engineer failed to do any damage to anybody with his shooting as well. And over here, the Sharpshooters couldn't damage the Wraiths in combat. The Steel Behemoth has moved to within striking distance of the Dominate Zone, though. So if there is a turn 7, then there's going to be more juicy action, I think. But currently, as it stands on the clocks, it's pretty close actually. The Undead have 2 minutes 23. The Dwarves, who had a very, very quick turn 6, have 2 minutes 36 left. So it would have to be very, very quick turn 7s if we do get them. And we're going to have the roll now. So 1 to 3, the game is over, and the Undead win. Here we go. It's a 1. The game is over. The only scoring unit is the Revenant King. So he is going to be able to pluck the juicy, succulent, ancient remains of King Granolius IV from this ancient burial ground and turn him into a Revenant Brethren to take to the battlefield in the future. So the dwarves are going to have to fight one of their own ancestors. Very, very unfortunate indeed for them. So this big piece of terrain here did quite well for the undead, and the dwarves, really this whole side of the table where they could actually access the scoring zone didn't go very well for them at all. It went well down here, but unfortunately those units were tied up for long enough so that they could never actually get back into the dominate zone, and the undead had a lot more speed, which meant that because the game was very spread out all the way across the table, the undead were able to actually get units back into the centre when it mattered. And had we gone into turn 7, I think probably the undead would have been able to get a few of these units into the middle, and then possibly would have lost some units, because the Steel Behemoth maybe would have charged somebody perhaps. The shooting might have finished off a unit or so. But overall I think the dwarves lacked a bit of speed on this flank in general. Right, let's get the old left-handed handshake in there.